Inspector Susan. Liam bowed to her when he saw Susan. Liam was close with Elder Kayla, and Susan was her disciple as well as an inspector. Liam needed to show his respect due to her status. Susan slightly nodded and turned to Jacob. I'll give you 1 minute to change. Jacob was the commanding general of the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, but that was not important to Susan. Jacob was Susan's assistant in the Dragon God Shrine. Jacob secretly pitied his hard life. He quickly went into Liam's room and changed into Hawaiian clothes. He looked like he was ready to go to the beach when he came back out of the bedroom. Jacob pitied himself some more when he thought of going to college in such an eye-catching outfit. Let's go. Susan waved the short bat in her hand at the door. I'll have to leave now, Elder Liam, Jacob said to Liam, embarrassed. Yes, all the best, Prince. Liam slightly bowed, embarrassed as well. The commanding general of the North Atlantic Dragon Clan was called out by a woman with a bat. The elevator opened and Susan and Jacob walked inside, side by side. The door to the elevator slowly closed, and the screen showed the floor number as they descended. Liam took his phone out at the door and dialed the number. Hello, the Dragon King? Jacob and Susan came out of the apartment building. It was still a bit chilly in the morning. Sunshine filled up the garden-style high-rise, and it looked stunning. What is our morning exercise? Jacob stretched his arms and asked. How are your injuries? Susan glimpsed at Jacob. Jacob realized that Susan was showing a human emotion for once. He smiled and said, It's almost healed. The medicine worked really well. In that case, let's double the strength of your morning exercise, Susan said lightly. What? Jacob's heart sank. Run! Susan struck his back with her bat and shouted. Susan didn't put much strength into it, but the bat hit right in the middle of Jacob's spine. He felt like the strike broke the bones in his back. This bat is made of 5-color stone, and is a treasure too. One hit will make you suffer for an entire day, continued Susan. Damn it! Jacob couldn't help but curse. Run faster than me if you don't want to get hit. Susan glanced at him even colder, and it cleared Jacob's thoughts about human emotions completely. This woman wasn't capable of those. Jacob ran immediately when Susan raised the short back again. But soon he realized that something was wrong. The 5 mountains bracelets in his arms, legs, and neck were as heavy as 5 mountains. How could someone run when they were dragging 5 mountains on their arms, legs, and neck? Susan's short bat landed mercilessly on Jacob's back again. The pain was so acute as it traveled into Jacob's brain immediately, making him almost scream out. So brutal. What a sadist, Jacob thought as he stepped ahead crazily, disregarding the weight of his body. Susan caught up easily with the bat in her hand, and it landed heavily on Jacob's back once again. You'll get more hits if you keep running this slowly, Susan ran beside Jacob. Damn it! Try to run with the 5 mountains bracelets yourself, Jacob said. You don't think I have? Susan looked at Jacob with determined eyes and said lightly as she ran ahead. Jacob looked down at Susan's ankles and hesitated for a second as he thought. Could the strength Susan is showing now not be her actual strength? Too slow! Susan's bat hit on Jacob again. Ouch! Jacob couldn't help but shout. He jumped forward and sped up immediately. The 5 mountains bracelets blocked 60% of Jacob's strength, including his nature essence and physical power. They borrowed the power of the 5 mountains to restrain the user, and the bracelets themselves were a set of top-tier treasures. Cultivators who were restrained by 5 mountain bracelets couldn't move at all, but Jacob was allowed to use 40% of his strength. However, it was tough to run like an ordinary person. A muscular man in a tank top and shorts surpassed Jacob and turned back to look at him with disdain. Then he raised his eyebrow and smiled at Susan. Ignoring him, Susan said to Jacob softly, Come on, 3 more rounds around the complex. Jacob almost started bleeding out of his nose. Such poor endurance. The muscular man looked at Jacob with more disdain and said. Then he sped up and ran further with his muscular legs. Jacob looked at that man and opened his eyes. Try the 5 mountains bracelets on and see if you can move half a step. Too slow. Susan raised the short back and swung it towards Jacob again. Jacob almost jumped up in pain, but he could neither defeat Susan nor escape, so he circulated his nature essence according to the sword shadow scroll with all his power and transferred most of his nature essence into his heels. A 6-year-old boy surpassed Jacob on a colorful tricycle. Then he looked back at Jacob with a smug look on his face. Since when did kids get so bratty? Jacob was pissed, but his back got hit again by Susan's bat. Too slow. It was Susan's devil-like voice again. Jacob was all sweaty after just a few minutes, yet he was still inside the neighborhood. The power of the 5 mountains bracelets was hundreds, even thousands of times stronger than the older bracelets. If Jacob weren't at the 4th level, he would have fallen to the ground as soon as he put the 5 mountains bracelets on. He wouldn't even be able to get up. How much further? Jacob asked Susan. He thought he only had to review for the written exams at night and had no idea that he had to go through such brutal training. Jacob realized that he completely fell into Susan's evil hand. You will be done when you get to school, Susan answered. How far are we? Jacob asked. Pretty close. Just 12 more miles. Susan smiled slightly, and her eyes looked like 2 new moons. The 5 mountains bracelets contain the power of the 5 fundamental elements. Unless the cultivator reached peak 8th level, which was on the verge of jumping out of the wheel of reincarnation, no one could escape the wrath of the bracelets. Inspectors used them to capture dragon cultivators, and sometimes even human cultivators. No matter which clan the cultivators belonged to, they would not be able to escape their power. Jacob practiced the Sword Shadow Scroll, which incorporated all 5 elements. However, even he could not escape the magic of the 5 mountains bracelets. Susan waved her hand in the air, skipping lightly, while still running at a brisk pace. She was beside Jacob, ensuring he was keeping up. The mortals passing them were unable to understand the pressure Jacob was under. Jacob was under the spell of the 5 sacred mountains, and every step took a toll on his body. His strength and nature essence decreased drastically with every movement. The 5 mountains bracelets were powerful enough to seal the nature essence and physical strength of cultivators who had the ability to transform into dragons. To capture these powerful cultivators, the one who had the bracelets on should not be able to have the ability to move freely. Susan forced Jacob to wear the powerful bracelets, but he could still use 40% of his power. However, for Jacob, who had only reached 4th level, even running was an extremely tedious exercise. If we don't get to the school by 8, the 5 mountain bracelets will decrease your power to only 20%, Susan said while briskly running alongside Jacob.